Gender-based violence, it's quite self-explanatory. Violence on the basis of one's gender, one's sexuality, their orientation, that constitutes as gender-based violence. Now, oftentimes people, don't see it go past, physical violence. But, if I, broaden it and I, expand it more, gender-based violence can even go as far as, emotional violence, mental violence, and around 90% of women in Pakistan do face gender-based violence. And when I say 90%, a lot of people, react, oh, how can 90% face gender-based violence? Well, taunts from your partner, emotional abuse from your partner constitutes as gender-based violence, even in the context, especially in the context of Pakistan. While Pakistan does have a very strong legal framework, there is a huge gap in implementation. There is a huge gap in, awareness around gender-based violence. For a lot of people, intimate partner violence especially doesn't constitute as something that needs to be, reported, doesn't constitute as gender-based violence for that matter. If I can expand this even further, gender-based violence can range to, domestic violence, marital rape, sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, sexual coercion, and it can even go as far as, inhibiting mobility for women, inhibiting their financial independence, and inhibiting their overall autonomy over themselves, over their body, over their emotions. So as we know that Pakistan is host to one of the largest refugee populations in the world. And if I talk about refugee women in particular, and when I say women, I'm talking about refugee transgender women, women with disabilities, women from ethnic and religious minorities, and young girls. So for them, this is, a multifaceted vulnerability to gender-based violence. The second they leave their house, they no longer have a roof over their head. They no longer have, autonomy over their finances. Even though that household, it's male-headed, it's patriarchal, the system is patriarchal, they still know their way around that household. So the second they leave, they're in uncharted territory. And that automatically starts this cycle of, forced marriages, early child marriages, and even, as far as it goes to honor killings as well. So when we talk about Afghan refugee women, again, in all their diversity, we're talking about women with great resilience, women who are ready to face anything and everything that is thrown at them. When I talk about, success stories and what I've learned from them, it's strength, it's empowerment, how women need to work together, how when we work together, we become a force that needs to be reckoned with. So we used to have a series of community dialogues, or bettaks as we call them in our local language. And, women in all their diversity, inclusive of transgender women, women with physical disabilities, young girls as well. They used to, sit together. We used to have awareness sessions with them. And not, in addition to those awareness sessions on gender-based violence, on SRHR, on menstrual health and rights, it became a community or, a chosen family for those young women. And, when it used to be an official thing, they used to come in, we used to talk, and somehow it just turned into this beautiful bond of camaraderie, of sisterhood, a feminist network of, Afghan refugee women. They would come together, they would talk it out, they would talk about their mental health issues, they would talk about, their run-ins with gender-based violence, how they came across it. And, they would also share resources if they knew someone at any particular organization to whom they could turn to report cases of gender-based violence, if they needed information on menstrual health and rights, if they needed information or access to sexual and reproductive health services. So it became a network, it became a safe space in a world of shrinking safe spaces. And interestingly, every time we had a community dialogue, the number grew. So what's really beautiful about this, that it became a system that was running with the community. Instead of having an intervention that was for the community, it was with the community, led by the community. So what was really great about it, that it focused on, the unique challenges, the needs and the rights of the community, because again, we had their insights. So it became a self-sustaining system of women coming together, creating a safe space, doing activities that really not just brought them together, but it gave them a space where they could be themselves, they could exercise their agency, they could exercise their autonomy, and they could, basically just be themselves in a, in a battle, in a struggle that they had been facing, because a lot of these women were running, from unwarranted persecution. They were activists, they were artists, they had previously, they were running offices. So a lot of these women were running from, again, unwanted persecution, from rape attempts, from forced marriages, from abusive partners. So when they came together, when they talked it out, not only were they in a safe space, but they also found solutions to their problems, to which maybe the host community could not come up with, because again there is a cultural lag. So these spaces became their second home for them, and it became a self-sustaining system. And I think we could learn a lot from this, because again it shows us that how we need to work with the communities, as opposed to for the communities, coming in with savior syndrome. It shows that there is so much power when you bring the community to the table, when you bring them to the decision making space, and then there's so much that you can take away, and then there's so much you can implement with their help for a better tomorrow and for better integration between the host community and the refugee community. When we talk about support systems and when we're talking about vulnerable communities, we can't forget the importance of intersectionality. It's really impossible to talk about GPV without the intersection of climate change, without the intersectionality of mental health and policy reform. Now, unfortunately, Pakistan is not doing great on the Gender Development Index, nor is it doing so well on the Climate Vulnerability Index. We've moved from 8th to 5th to the first most vulnerable country to climate change. So it's really imperative that when we are talking about reforms, when we're talking about policy, we look into climate change as a threat as well. Because not only are Afghan women, displaced from their country, when they reach Pakistan, they further face displacement, especially in areas such as KP and Balochistan, which have been one of the hardest hit areas in super floods in 2022 as well, and this year as well. So it's a threat multiplier for them. They come, they settle in, and then they face displacement once again because of super floods, because of droughts, which inhibits again their access to sexual and reproductive health, to menstrual health, and overall their bodily autonomy for that matter. And what oftentimes happens is that during evacuation processes, the documentation is with the male the head of the household, because again, these are patriarchal systems, so they don't have access to the documentation. When it comes to access to basic necessities, they don't get them at first priority, because again it's the men and the young boys who are supposed to get these provisions first, so they're last at the end of the chain in that as well. So there's that problem as well. If I talk about support system, first of all, Pakistan needs a proper policy reform. We're not signatory to any convention that would safeguard the refugee population here in Pakistan. And we cannot ignore the fact that the Afghan population has been part of Pakistan's social fabric for over 4 decades now. So to completely ignore their existence, their contribution to our social and economic fabric would be a great injustice and a great delusion on our part as well. So it's really important that we create a policy framework so that any decisions that just happen on a whim, decision that welcomes a community at 1 second and then expels the community at another second, is not just a human right violation, but also shows great gaps in policy reform and policy implementation in Pakistan. So we need to create a policy framework that is again not made just for the community, but it's made with the community. We need to ensure that people from the refugee population are part of the policy making process. And when I say people from the community, I'm talking about women who are entrepreneurs from the community, young girls, youth in particular, because they have their own unique problems and challenges. Challenges with identity, challenges in accessing life-based skills. We need to have transgender persons in the conversation as well. We also need to have persons with disability in the population as well. So we need to create a self-sustaining system, a self-sustaining framework of policy reform that is again working with the community and for the community. One thing I would really like to point out is the power of community-based initiatives. If we can create a system that is basically run by the community, it would also create a sense of security to the community persons who are accessing those services. For example, if we talk about access to menstrual health or maternal health services, there is a concept of midwives in the global south, in both Pakistan and Afghanistan. women can be trained and are trained. I'm really glad to see that this provision is going on already in Pakistan. We really need to expedite it to a greater extent, to especially major refugee hotspot in Pakistan, that in addition to vocational training, women are trained on birthing, on midwifery, so that we can create a chain cycle or a chain reaction of access to menstrual health, to maternal health, to reproductive health among the community, and that system would be run by the community itself. And in terms of support system, we need to create helplines, we need to create sort of access points where women can report their incidences of gender-based violence, of domestic violence on these helplines. And an important part of these helplines would be that they would be not in just Pashto, they should be in Dari as well, because that is a widely spoken language. Oftentimes people don't come up with their complaints because they face a challenge in talking about it because of a language barrier, because of a cultural barrier. So it's important that these interventions are run by Afghan women themselves. They're trained to do so. They are given the proper education, the proper reforms needed. They run these systems which are inclusive of language, inclusive of disability, and inclusive of their cultural and ethical concerns as well. So if I bring this up very quickly, if I just end it up very quickly. So we need policy reform that is inclusive, we need policy reform that is intersectional, and we need policy reform that is working with the community as opposed to for the community.